Hello from the kitchen, folks. It's another experimental brew day. I've got two brews I'm doing today, and in this film I'm going to be making a dark honey beer. So I'm making my beer from grain. I'm going to be using a combination of crushed pale malt and crushed roasted barley to give it that darkness and that smokiness. So I want 1 kilo of grain in total, so I'm going to begin by adding the pale malt. I've not got 1 kilo of that, but I'm going to then top up what I have got from the dark roasted malt. So this is 650 grams of pale, so I'll then need to add 350 grams of dark malt. And I'll pop the pale. You can really smell the sort of chocolatey bitterness to this. And on my dark malt goes. Now it's the first time that I've done this recipe where I'm brewing with both the malts at the same time together. It's all experimentation. I'm learning as I'm doing. I'm new to beer brewing, so I just want to see how it works and try it in different ways. So I'm going to add a full 5 litres of spring water into this, and I'm using spring water because the tap water in Leeds is a bit chlorine-y. So I'm just going to give all this a nice stir, get the grains mixed together. I can already smell it. It smells a bit like chocolate Ovaltine, you know, something like that. Okay, I'll get the heat on. And I now need to leave this to come to a boiling temperature and then let it simmer for a good 90 minutes. I've got to do that with the lid off to release sulphide smells, otherwise you end up with cabbagey tasting beer. So this is bubbling away nicely, and it's got about another 20 minutes to go before I turn the heat off. Okay, so there's my black liquid. As you can see, the water level's dropped a lot as it's evaporated. This has been simmering for 90 minutes. I've let it stand for 90 minutes and now I'm just bringing it back to heat. So I want to weigh out some hops. There we go. I'm going to add those hops into the mix. So you can see the hop pellets have already started to disintegrate. I'm going to add some more water now in and top that pan up. So the pan's nice and full. It's on the heat. I'm going to let that come to the boil and then simmer for 30 minutes, and then I'm switching it off, and then that will be the wort done. I've now just added a little bit of spring water into this pan here. I want that to come to the boil. So we've got bubbles appearing. So now I'm going to start to pour the honey into that. And I want the hot water to dissolve the honey. The honey's dissolved, but I want to make a strong beer with a high ABV. So I'm now going to add about 200 grams of sugar into that. Sugar's melted and this water is now nice and buoyant. This has now been simmering away for a good 30 minutes. It's time to turn it off, and I'm just going to let it stand and cool a little before adding to the Demijohn. So I've got my Demijohn, funnel and sieve ready, and now it's time to start filtering. So you can see that lovely black wort. So the Demijohn's filling nicely. But then this needs teasing through the sieve a little. Well, it's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it. And now it's time to add the honey and sugar solution. So I've got my sample flask to measure the original gravity, and I've got my hydrometer. So I need to take the gravity at 20 degrees and it's currently 38.8. So I need to let this cool down a little bit before I take the gravity, so I shall come back in a while. Okay, so the liquid is near enough 20 degrees for me to take the gravity. So in goes the hydrometer. Let's see where that settles. And that is looking that's going to be strong. That is looking like 1074 to me. 1074 original gravity. So we've got to remember that number for next time. So it's now time to add the beer yeast. I'm using Cross My Loof Brew Belgian Ale yeast. So I just need to mix this up a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is put my GoPro on time lapse so you can see the yeast activating. So it's 24 hours later and the dark honey beer is popping away nicely. The yeast is activated strongly and this is going to be a good brew. After only a week, the honey beer, the dark honey beer, it seems to have stopped fermenting. If you look at the airlock, the water is on the wrong side. Really, it should be pushed to that side. So I'm just going to try and liven it up a little bit. This is simply some golden syrup dissolved in some water, in some spring water. I'm just going to add a little bit in the top and see if that livens it up a little bit and gets fermentation going again. Well, there's definitely some life in this. I can see bubbles going upwards. So what I've actually done is I've swapped the airlock because I was wondering if there was a problem with the airlock. We'll see what happens when the pressure builds up. Well, as you can see, folks, there's nothing wrong with that now. So it turns out all it needed was feeding with a little bit more sugar, which it got from the golden syrup and spring water solution, and a bit of warmth by a roaring log fire. That's going lovely now. And there's so much action there, you can see. Nice little krausen, nothing coming out the top. Looks good, sounds good. The fermentation continues. Good evening from the kitchen, folks. Tonight I'm going to be adding finings to my dark honey beer, which you will see is doing nada. So yesterday, good activity again in front of the fire. Nice bit of sugar, nice bit of activity. It seems to have worn itself out. The yeast is not doing anything anymore now. So I've decided I'm going to cut my losses. I want to reuse this Demijohn. So I'm going to get it out of there into this one, add some finings and take it from there. You'll see that there's a lot of sediment in the bottom of this, so I want to avoid taking that across with me. With the dark beers, I don't often want to clean them because, you know, you don't need it to be clear if it's a dark beer. You can't see through it. But the ones that I have bottled already upstairs have got quite a heavy sediment deposit in the bottom. So I think by clearing it, I'm hopefully going to avoid that. That's the plan anyway. Let's just see how it goes. So bung out, gin tube in, and now the fun bit. And then it goes like crude oil. So you can just see where the end of the pipe is, where the sediment is beginning to raise. I want to get as much out as possible. I'm going to end up getting some sediment across. It's no big deal really. I want to get as much beer out of this as I can. So we're going to get bubbles in the tube any second now. There we go. And that is the siphoning over. So just out of curiosity, I'm just going to have a little nifter and see what I think at this point. Wow. Definitely get the honey. And a really dark bitterness as well. It's quite an interesting combination. I think it's a porter. I think I'd call this a porter actually, if anything. A honey porter. Promising. Definitely promising. So I'm using Clear wine finings from Young's. You put some finings A in first and then some finings B an hour later. So I'm going to put the A in now. Usually about a teaspoon it says. So I want the finings to mix with the beer, so give it a good swish around. Right, I need to leave this for an hour before adding finings B. Right folks, an hour has passed, so it's time to put in finings B. Give it a good shake around. A head, always a good sign when you're making a beer. And listen. So I've cleaned out the original Demijohn that it was in before. We got the funnel in the top, and now all that remains is for it to go back in there. And that goes back into the Demi. And now I'm going to leave this for 2 or 3 days and see what happens. I'm hoping I'm going to see an accumulation of sediment at the bottom, and if I do, that means that the finings have done their job. Right, so I'll be back when it comes to bottling. See you later. Afternoon folks, it's back to the brew in the kitchen. Today it's bottling day for my honey porter, which has been sat very nicely with the clearing wine finings in there. And you can see a nice level of sediment at the bottom. The finings have done their job, they've dragged the stuff out of there. Now I want to get it out of here and into these clean and sterilised bottles. Bungs ready in boiling water, just softening them. I've got my cages there. And the first job is to get these carbonation drops into the bottles. And it is 3 carbonation drops per 750ml bottle. The purpose of the carbonation drops is to give a secondary fermentation in the bottle so that the beer will get a little bit of bubble in it, hopefully a head, and a small amount of fizz. I obviously don't want loads of fizz, but you know, it's nice when you pour a beer and it's got a bit of life in it. So bung out, siphoning tube in, and now the fun bit. And look at that, still like tar. So I need to keep the siphoning tube above the level of the sediment, which it just about is. So I'm decanting today into the plastic Demijohn rather than straight into the bottles, just because I don't want to waste any. In a few seconds we're going to get bubbles in the tube, and that will signify the siphoning being over. It's just beginning to get a little bit of sediment, and there's the bubbles. That's it. Okay. Before I bottle, I want to take the final gravity of this brew. And I'm definitely appreciating the fact that that's got a small head on it, even just from that. So I'm going to pop the hydrometer in. And let's see what our final gravity is. So the final gravity for this is 1.030, 1030. So I now need to work out from the final gravity and the original gravity what the alcohol content of this is. So the original gravity was 1074, 1.074. From that I minus the final gravity, which is 1.030, equals 0.044, and I multiply that by 131.25, and that gives me a final alcohol percentage of, we can say, 5.8%. Not quite as strong as I'd imagined, but it's still a decent brew, so I'm happy. I'm just going to very carefully pour, using a funnel, into each bottle. I really wanted to try and get 5 bottles out of this, but I think I'm going to end up with 4. So the plastic corks have been softening in hot water. You need to do this, otherwise it's really hard to get them in the bottles, and then it's just a bit of a push. It's quite painful. 2. Number 3. Number 4. And last but not least, the sample bottle, which is number 5. And yes, it's clear glass. I don't care. It's not going to be in daylight. It can get a bit painful, so softening them in hot water is really a good idea. Right, cages. These need to go on, because if they don't go on, then there's going to be some explosive cork incidents. It'll keep them in place. It's for a reason. There should be another fermentation takes place in the bottle with the carbonation drops, so I really need to make sure that these corks won't go flying. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So that's all of the corks and cages in. So I didn't manage 5 full ones, but I'm not too far off. Right, so I've got my labels on, apart from the sample bottle. I'm going to leave these now for a month, and then I shall be trying the clear bottle to see what it's like. So I shall be back with you in a month's time. Evening from the kitchen, folks. It's honey porter opening and tasting time. This has been in the bottle for 1 month and 3 days. I'm hoping for a little bit of sparkle. I'm hoping for some nice flavour. I have no idea what I'm going to get. As usual, I'm quite nervous about opening this in case it goes everywhere, which has happened in the past. So I'm hoping for not a fountain, not a bottle bomb, but something with a decent sparkle, hopefully a little bit of a head. So here goes. So hopefully we're not going to get sprayed. Ah, that was an encouraging sound. A little bit of mist came out then. Okay, so it pours like tar. Fizzy tar, always a nice sign. So honey porter, 5.8%. I'm pretty happy. Brewed in a Demijohn from grain. Smells wonderful. It doesn't look too bad either. It's absolutely delicious. I can't believe it. I'm over the moon. I did not expect it to be that good. It could turn out great. It could turn out to be a disaster. It's turned out great. It tastes really flavoursome. It's kept its head. And once again, cheers. The film that you've just watched is a Moss Home and Garden production. You can find more by going to www.mosshomeandgarden.co.uk. I'd just like to say thank you very much for supporting my YouTube channel and for watching my films. It really is very much appreciated. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my YouTube channel in order to receive future updates about the home and garden films which I upload. You can find my YouTube channel by going to www.mosshomeandgarden.co.uk. please click on the red subscribe button. When you've done that, a little bell will appear. If you press that also, then you'll get future updates about the films which I upload. If you like my films, if you like my style of filming, then you might also like my travel channel, which you will find by going to youtube.com/Stuart Moss or type in www.mosstravel.tv. Again, if you could subscribe to that channel, it would be hugely appreciated. If you'd like to get Moss Home and Garden updates on Facebook, then please open Facebook and do a search for Moss Home and Garden, and you will find the page. If you like the page, then you will get future updates on there. And if you'd like to connect on Instagram for home, garden and travel photography, as well as some stories, then my username is StuMoss, STUMOSS. If you'd like to connect on Twitter, then my username is @StuartMoss. And if you'd like to contact me about film usage or any other issue, please just email me on stewmosshomegarden@gmail.com. Once again, thank you very much for supporting my channel, for watching my films. I do appreciate it. I'd just like you all to have a great day.